How's it going, folks? I'm Des with DesFit, and this is the Garmin Instinct Solar long-term review. So Garmin did more than just add solar charging to the original Instinct. They also updated the heart rate sensor, they added blood oxygen saturation monitoring, and they also increased the battery life significantly, even without the solar charging. And if you add in that solar charging, it basically gets some of the best battery life that you can currently get out of a Garmin watch. So just like all my other reviews, I tested the Instinct Solar really thoroughly, and I have a lot of data to share in terms of the GPS accuracy, the heart rate accuracy, as well as the altimeter. I tried to do as many activities as possible with it just to give you a really good idea if this device is going to be right for you. So if this video does help you out at all, don't be shy about hitting that like button down below, as it definitely helps the channel out a lot. In this video, I'll be covering the base level Instinct Solar, but there are 3 other versions that you can choose from. So there's going to be a camo version that has a camo case. There's also going to be a surf edition that has tie data as well as a surf specific profile. And there's also going to be a tactical edition that has night vision compatibility, a stealth mode, as well as a jump master profile. Garmin kept with the extremely well-received design of the original Instinct, and unless you take a really close look, it's kind of hard to tell the difference. The first thing that you may notice is that there's now this new little chart on the watch face that shows the solar exposure the watch has had over the last 6 hours. There's also a little sun icon, which fills up like a nice, tasty apple pie when it has a full sun exposure, and a sad, empty pie when there isn't any sun. And hidden underneath that display is a solar panel that has a 10% photovoltaic level, but the real magic comes from these reflective bits that surround the display, and these solar panels get a full 100% photovoltaic level. The Instinct Solar may only be a black and white display, but let me tell you that this display is one of the easiest to read displays out there, especially in direct sunlight. It has tons of contrast, and the data layout, including that unique little cutout window, makes this very usable for sports and fitness. And another huge benefit to this type of display is going to be battery life. So the original Instinct had some pretty decent battery life, but the Instinct Solar takes this to a whole new level. So in smartwatch mode, as in if you're not going to be recording any outdoor activities, you could potentially get 24 days out of it. And then if you add in solar charging, you could potentially double that. There's also a battery saver watch mode that disables a lot of the sensors and makes this, just a watch. It shows you the time and the date, of course, but will still track your steps. But this will disable the heart rate sensor and it won't be connected to your phone. But in this mode, you could get up to 56 days, and that's without any solar charging. But here's what's cool is that you could potentially get unlimited battery life from the Instinct Solar if you expose the watch to enough sunlight each day. For GPS battery life for recording outdoor activities, it has an advertised battery life of up to 30 hours. So you could easily do a full 24-hour outdoor activity, and this is with recording heart rate. However, if you add in some sun, you can get an additional 8 hours out of it. And if you want even more battery life, you can use some of the power management modes like the max battery option or the expedition mode, which disables and enables certain sensors. And then in addition to those built-in battery modes, you can create your own custom battery mode recipe based on whatever type of functions you need for your particular type of activity. And then you can name these whatever you wish. The Instinct Solar has an updated heart rate sensor from the original Instinct, which now supports wrist-based swimming heart rate, and it also includes an SpO2 sensor for measuring blood oxygen levels. We'll get into the heart rate accuracy here in just a little bit when we go over all the sports and fitness features, but for the SpO2 sensor, you can take on-demand readings if you'd like, but the SpO2 sensor is going to be primarily used for more detail with sleep tracking. As a smartwatch, it'll provide one-way notifications on an iPhone, and you can also reply to text with predefined responses if you have an Android phone. It comes with quite a wide variety of sport profiles, from lots of outdoor profiles like running, biking, as well as open water swimming, adventure sports like skiing, snowboarding, and paddleboarding, and then plenty of gym-based profiles like the strength training, pool swimming, and a generic cardio profile for anything that may not fall into one of those buckets. In terms of how well the Instinct Solar performs for sports and fitness, we're first going to start with outdoor activities and how accurate it is for GPS, as well as elevation using the barometric altimeter. For GPS performance, I pretty much have 0 complaints with the Instinct Solar, and it performed really well for everything that I threw at it, from running to lots and lots of mountain biking, as well as road biking, where the total distances pretty much always lined up. And then in terms of the really fine detail the GPS tracks, again, it did really well, and it's kind of hard to find a complaint here. So in fact, on this ride, it was actually more accurate than the Fenix 6 and some very dense tree cover at some high speeds going through the forest. I did have one very minor hiccup that I had on just one mountain bike ride right here, and these were some tight switchbacks that I was taking at some higher speeds. It cut in just slightly on this one corner, but this is basically the only thing that I could even find in terms of the fault with the GPS. The Instinct Solar also has Garmin ski and snowboard activity profiles where it can automatically track your runs using the altimeter. After each run, the watch can sense when you're ascending on the chairlift, and it gives you your last run data, including the distance of that run, max speed, average speed, and the total elevation loss. And you'll also be able to see a cumulative total of all your runs, total distance, and total elevation loss. When you're done skiing, you can see all of this data in Garmin Connect, where it gives you a map of your day and tons more detail that you can scour over. And then before we get into the altimeter, I also want to go over how well the Instinct Solar did in terms of estimating indoor running distances while running on a treadmill. And it did quite well on this run where it was just 4/100ths of a mile off from what was being recorded on the treadmill. And then on this run here, it was just 7/100ths off. That's pretty darn good, and for some reason it is off. You can calibrate it when you're done with your run and you're ready to save. So that's the GPS accuracy, but now let's go over the altimeter. I had some occasions with the Instinct Solar where the elevation data that was being collected was a bit off, so I was really curious if that was going to be better with the Instinct Solar. And I do have a lot of data to share in this department because I really wanted to test this portion really thoroughly. The screenshot to the left is the Instinct Solar. The middle screenshot is from Strava, and this is the corrected elevation figure. And if you're not familiar with corrected elevation in Strava, it's basically a way for you to use Strava's base map to calculate elevation gain if for some reason your device data is off. And then the screenshots on the right are going to be additional devices just for comparison. And you can see on this ride, everything's perfectly fine, including the maximum elevation figure. Then there's this right here where there was a decent amount of elevation gain, and the Instinct Solar was pretty close to the corrected elevation figure in Strava, as well as the Edge 530 and a Polar Grit X, which I had attached to my backpack. And then here's just one more example where things were just dandy. And then here's a ride that I just did recently where you can see that it was just a little bit shy of the corrected elevation figure in Strava, but close to the Phoenix 6 Sapphire. But I did have two rides where the elevation was a bit off, so on this ride it came up quite a bit short of two other devices. And then there's this ride where it also came up short. So what exactly happened on those two rides? Well, my theory is that those two rides were done in some really hot temperatures, and I was likely sweating a lot, and I'm definitely a sweater, so some sweat may have been introduced into the altimeter. So just to get a little bit more geeky with my testing, I also wanted to do a couple more rides where I was kind of eliminating that variable altogether. So what I did was I mounted the Instinct Solar on my handlebars and just to see the results. Again, the left screenshot is the Instinct Solar mounted on my bars, and then the Strava corrected elevation figure, and then the other devices just for comparison. And you can see here that the Instinct Solar is right in line. And here's another test that had considerably more elevation gain. And again, we can say the same thing where the Instinct Solar, while mounted on the handlebars, was right in line with everything else. So in the last 6 months of my testing, I did have those two occasions where the elevation data that was being collected on the Instinct Solar was a bit off, but in all the other tests, it was perfectly fine. So if you do have any issues with your altimeter, just make sure that there's nothing affecting your barometric altimeter. I'll have more information about that in a link in the description below. And finally, let's wrap things up with heart rate accuracy. So on this run, it was interesting where the chest heart rate strap actually took about 3 minutes to lock onto the heart rate, but after that, it was just fine. But for the Instinct Solar, it was okay for about the first 2/3 of the run, but there were some spots where it spiked a little bit, and then at the end of the run, it wandered a bit more. On this treadmill run, it took about 20 seconds for the Instinct Solar to lock on, and then for the first third of the run, it was pretty much right in line. It then had a few points where it wandered in the middle, and then it locked back on for a bit, dipped for a little bit here, but the remainder was okay. And then on this run, it was kind of funny that the first 3 minutes, all the heart rate sensors were a little bit off, but the rest of the run was really quite good. There was a little bit of weirdness right here, but for most of the run, I'd call this pretty good. For cycling on this road ride, things looked pretty nice. There was some collective wonkiness by pretty much all the heart rate sensors at the beginning of the ride, but after that, these are pretty good results. A couple blips here and there, but overall, this is pretty good. And then here's an indoor cycling session where everything is pretty much good to go. There were a few little bobbles at the beginning, but other than that, I'd call this good. But indoor cycling is probably one of the easiest activities for a wrist-based heart rate sensor to get accurately just because there's very few variables involved. However, mountain biking, that's a whole different story where there's going to be a lot of variables involved, such as wrist flexion, there's going to be a lot of movement, especially when you're going down rougher terrain. And we can see that illustrated pretty well right here. So the first 2/3 of the ride was a long uphill climb and the heart rate was actually pretty good. But as soon as I started to go downhill, the heart rate kind of went off the rails due to the rougher terrain. However, on this ride, I was kind of blown away at how well it did. There are definitely some spots where it wandered, but this is actually one of the best results I've had from a wrist-based heart rate sensor for mountain biking. And then another activity that's going to be really challenging for a wrist-based heart rate sensor is going to be weight training. And just because, again, there's going to be a lot of wrist flexion and a lot of varying arm movement. And this is basically what you can expect from most wrist-based heart rate sensors for weight training. I don't really need to deep dive into this as it's pretty clear what's going on here. So with weight training as well as mountain biking, if you want to collect accurate heart rate, I'd recommend getting an external chest heart rate strap, and I'll have a link for a video down in the description below where I have some recommendations for some budget options. The Instinct Solar also can collect heart rate in the water for swimming, and with swimming, again, it can be a bit challenging for a wrist-based heart rate sensor with all the arm movement, but also the possibility of water getting in between your skin and the sensor. And I don't look for perfection with swimming wrist-based heart rate, and the Instinct Solar wasn't terrible, but obviously not as accurate as a chest heart rate strap that's designed for swimming. It follows along the trends well, but you can see that it tracked a bit low for most of the swim. But then this portion right here is interesting, where it was actually exactly the same during the rest period, but then it tracked a little high for the last few laps. But for the rest of the swim tracking, the Instinct Solar did well with the automatic lap detection, and the total distance was in line with another device where I was manually tracking the laps. And finally, the Instinct Solar also does come with Garmin's strength training activity profile, which is designed to automatically count your reps and attempt to identify the exercise that you're doing. The results for the rep counting are generally pretty good, but the exercise recognition can be hit and miss. Like on this workout, the rep counting was close, only being off by 1 rep on a few different sets. And for the exercise recognition, what's interesting is that this is actually probably one of the better results I've had. So the first set of exercises was indeed bench press, and it identified it perfectly. But the second set of exercises were tricep extensions, not rows. But then on the third set, it properly identified the bicep curls that I was doing. It does allow you to edit the rep count during the workout once you're done with each set, and it also allows you to enter the weight if you'd like, but you can also do this after the fact once the activity is saved in Garmin Connect, where you can also edit the exercise type from an enormous list of exercises along with the reps and enter the weight if you wish. So the Instinct Solar really is a massive upgrade from the original Instinct. It's not just adding the solar charging, there's also the increased battery life even without the solar charging. There's the power management modes, the updated heart rate sensor, as well as the SpO2 sensor. The GPS performance is very similar to the original Instinct, where I had 0 complaints there. The heart rate performance, even though it does have an updated heart rate sensor, it's going to perform about the same as the original Instinct as well, where for steady state activities it does really well, but it will have some more challenges with activities like mountain biking as well as weight training. Anyhow, if this video helped you out at all, if you liked the video, make sure to hit that like button down below and also subscribe to the channel for plenty more sports tech videos that are coming soon. In the meantime, have fun out there, and we will see you in the next video.